Hello, good morning everyone. Today we're going to tell you a bit about our pilot project, Harvesting the Frisian Domain Crawl. First we're going to tell a bit about the KB and the context, then we'll outline the project, and then we'll wrap up with the results. So at the KB we have two teams. So we have, on the one hand, we have our technical team who supports the technical side of the crawling, so the hardware, the software. And on the other side, we have the collection teams, and these are the ones that make decisions about what to crawl and also do quality assurance for us. And these teams work together a lot, of course, but they are also non-dedicated. So they all have tasks beside web archiving. At the KB we have a selective web archive. So this means we normally do not domain crawl. We do have a very large web archive of about 22,000 websites, and we call it also a web collection. This is because we select each website manually. We also have within those 22,000 websites a couple of sub-collections. And in this conference you may have heard about our Access for All collection and the COVID-19 collection, but we have different ones as well. Access is provided through our reading room, so you have to visit the KB physical. We have a little access for researchers, which we're just starting out with, and this is usually through specific programs. So we have a researcher in residence program, or we have projects with other organizations, and at the moment IIPC is running. And of course we have internships as well. So we harvest our selective archive through with Heritrix, which is controlled by the Web Curator tool, which is a software management tool for controlling Heritrix.
Is this one on? Yeah? Yeah, it is. Yeah, I hear myself an echo. Okay, so we have some legal issues at the National Library. So we do not have a legal deposit. But the KB wants to archive everything that was published in and about the Netherlands. And that's including websites. So we have a broad collection of like manuscripts, newspapers, books, digitized material. But websites are also seen as publications. So what we do is we use an opt-out principle. So that means that we get the permissions from everybody. So we tell them we are intending to crawl your website. And if you do not agree with this, then please let us know. But fortunately, there's an ongoing joint lobby going on at the National Archive, not the National Archive, the National Library, maybe also at the National Archive, who knows. But we are in a joint lobby together to try to alter the law, which means we would have a legal base to web archive. And that would come especially in handy as we want to archive our national domain. So we want to crawl the whole .nl domain, so the Dutch web. This is about 6 million websites that we want to crawl yearly a year, so that would equals 100 terabyte a year that would come our way. But we needed to prepare for this because the last pilot that we did with a domain crawl was back in 2000. So we were really lacking experience with our new team. So we did a pilot for our national domain, which is the Frisian domain crawl. And that's what we're talking about today, and we want to share our lessons learned.
For those of you who do not live in the Netherlands, let me explain what Friesland is. So it's a province in the Netherlands, and it has its own distinct language, which is also internationally recognized as its own language. And as such, they also have their own domain. So in the Netherlands, we have .nl domain, top-level domain, and the Frisian has the .frl domain. And because this is considerably smaller than the .nl domain, it turned out to be a perfect test case to get a feeling for what a domain crawl is and how to execute one. So when we started the project, our curator, Kees de Zelski, came at us right away. It was his idea to start this domain crawl, and he quickly explained to us that doing a domain crawl is more than just harvesting the top-level domain. So together with him, we worked on defining what our domain crawl selection would look like, and we decided on 3 groups. So the first one was the top-level domain one, so the .frl websites. And for the second, our case asked experts of Frisian language and culture to give us websites they found important. And lastly, we decided also to crawl a Frisian Wikipedia page, domain.
So the scope of the pilot, I've written it down here, but I won't repeat everything. But the main thing to remember was that we were really limited in time. So I've written down some years again, and those who heard me speak on Wednesday will fear with me. So we started selecting in 2017. The pilot became practical in 2020. Then we had a web archiving team that was somewhat dedicated. That started in February 2021. And then during the spring and summer of the same year, we started actual testing, and the actual crawling started in September 2021. So it was quite a long way before we actually got to do something. So that was why some things were in scope and some things were out of scope. And the main thing to remember was that there were a lot of ad hoc issues that we couldn't really address because the time was so limited. Thanks to Iris, we have this beautiful, I think it's beautiful, overview. So below you see like a screenshot of the NetArchive suite. So NetArchive suite is basically a web interface with a heritage scroller underneath. And we used it because, well, we asked other libraries, what are you using for your domain crawl? And this was one of them. But we also didn't want to use the WCT as we were using that for our selective archives already. And we didn't want to mingle the two together. So here you have like an overview, like how does this work? So you have the live website, you give seeds, so the URLs that you want to harvest to the NetArchive suite. You have to determine your settings, then your heritage scroller will do all the magic, and you end up with WAC and log files. So that's in a nutshell what's happening. But we needed to test the settings because we were using heritage already, but we knew that we had to alter the settings for a domain crawl. So we're testing this. And I will explain one of them. So that's the discovery path in your log files. So what we see here on the slide marked in yellow is the discovery path. And you can also see like a character legend, like which character resembles what. But the discovery path is like the whole path of the crawler hub. So from the original seed to where you want to end. So every type of hub has a different character. And our content strategy when we started testing was to harvest the website as complete as possible, but they had to be related to the original seed. And we used some local Python scripting skills to compare our results and to try to filter out as much as irrelevant content as possible. So we had some tests. So the first one was that we permitted 5 E's and 1 X. So this means like we basically used our default settings that we would use for a selective harvest. But the result here was that we had too much unwanted content. So we were trying to filter this out, and we were a bit more strict. That we say, okay, you can no longer do like I knew this would be difficult, a speculative embed. But the 2 E's were still permitted, so the redirects. And the result was that we did no longer no longer harvest the relevant PDF files and also the style sheet. So we were way too strict. So that's when we came up with a third test that we would still allow the 2 E's and no X, except if the X was found on the original URL. So this meant that the PDF files and the style sheets were back. So we had a more complete website, but filtered out as much as irrelevant content as we could. And you can see here how that looks like in the settings, just to be complete.
Yes, so now we had the settings right, we could start crawling. So we divided them up into 4 batches. So we did the Frisian domain, the top level domain, then we did the expert list, then we did Wikipedia, and then we circled back to the Frisian domain with fresh data. Why? Let me explain. So the first time we harvested the .frl domain, it was with a seed list that was about 2-3 years old. So we harvested about 300 gigabytes with 900 and XXX domains. But the quality of the scroll turned out to be quite poor. So as you can see over here, through metadata, we found that almost half of these domains harvested next to nothing. So that was quite a disappointing result. When we started crawling the expert list, things improved a little bit. So we had 180 gigabytes for only 828 domains. So the result was we harvested a lot more with a lot less domains. The quality also improved vastly. As you can see here, the domains that harvested next to nothing became very little, and the green, so between 1 megabyte and 1 gigabyte, became very large, which was very nice and a way better result. So then we thought, what happened at the Frisian domain crawl? Why was the result so disappointing? So we updated our seed lists with a new version, and as you can see here, we had less domains, but we harvested a lot more, and also the quality improved. As you can see over here. But in the end, our expert list did remain the best quality based on the metadata. So that's why we discovered like the seed list method, because the expert list was manually selected by experts who looked at the websites. So you had a way better result with the seed list of the top level domain, which was created automatically. I also had a little fun harvesting Wikipedia. I really love harvesting these big domains because yes, they are big, and but they're also very structured. So I could really dive into a page and determine together with the collection teams what we wanted and what we didn't want, and really narrowed down the harvesting of the domain. So we decided to exclude login pages and also edit pages, because Heritrix can harvest these pages, but you get the same page over and over and over, namely you cannot log in or you cannot edit because you have to log in. And we decided we don't need this page 10,000 times in our archive. We will just exclude it and get a cleaner harvest. So we ended up with these groups of excludes, so the edit pages, the login pages, and we, together with collections, we also decided we only wanted one version of the page, namely the website page. So not the mobile version or the print version or download version, just the website page. And this also crawled, and it was very nice because we harvested about 90 gigabytes of data, and the crawl ended after 5 days, which was on its own, which was very, very nice.
Okay, so some lessons learned. So I already told you we had some ad hoc issues that occurred during the pilot. So one of this was started actually with installing our tool, but also using it. So it's not that these are like the minus and plus points of this tool. Disclaimer there, but it's just what we experienced. So Iris was responsible for importing the URLs, and she had some difficulties there. But the problem was that we didn't have that much time to really dive into it, like what happened here. So we couldn't really like get to the base of the problem. And the available metadata, well, there was some metadata, it wasn't that much. And when we're using Heritrix, we really used to have like all these separate metadata files. So separate log files, an overview of what was harvested, exactly when, the response code, the MIME types. But with NetArchive Suite, it was all in one metadata file. So from a preservation perspective, we wanted them separate because it's easier to handle. So we were really not used to this. But a plus point was importing the settings, and the crawler traps went really well. So we didn't really experience any difficulties there. We also really had to understand the settings before testing because, well, if you're a bit familiar with Heritrix and you see the settings, there are a lot of possibilities there. And it was really a trial and error. We just tried something, look at the results, like, hey, what happened here? but we didn't really know what we did when we started it. So you really need an expert on that, on heritrix. We also wanted a process for quality control because we didn't have like a ground truth, like this is the best. So we experienced that it would be very handy if we had one. And we also thought of some preservation requirements. So this was not in the scope of the project, as we were doing this as a pilot and not really as making a new collection. So not something that we wanted to keep for the long term. But it's good to have some preservation requirements. So we did formulate some, which I share here. So we did ask ourselves the question, like, how would we preserve a national domain? And we had some core principles that we can use for future policies. And two of them are integrity and authenticity of our collections. So for integrity, and authenticity both, actually, you try like to determine like how complete and how real is this material. Those are the questions with the two involved. So for integrity, you would have like checksums on file level to check like is it still the same? Are all the bits and bytes in the right place? And we also want to like preserve context information to really understand how the process went, because context information can take different forms. But to have like the log files to really understand like what did this crawler do, what went well, what went wrong, that's good to have as well. And for authenticity, we had to determine like default settings for domain crawl. We tried very hard. We discussed very hard about it as well. We're still not fully well have this ground truth yet, but we had some experience with it. And we also like need to reconstruct preservation and events. So like what happened with this object. So for example, the creation is one of the first steps in the life cycle of this digital object. So that's something that you need.
Last but not least, well, I discussed already the seed list, so keeping it up to date is important, is what we learned. We also learned that some of the domains were in the automatic list were delivered in Punycode, which is of course normal when you have a province that has an A with a circumflex on it in its own language. So lots of domains had the A with the roof on it. And the last thing what was also very interested is the automated seed list contained reserved names. So for government and non-governmental organization, an internet domain is required to reserve domains. So for the Red Cross, for example, there were 6,000 domains in our seed list which did not contain any content, but were only reserved for against hacking or abuse on the internet. So getting to know your seed list and knowing these things will help you determine if the quality is what you should expect. And that's it. That's our time, I think. So yeah, lots of trial and error, and just keeping your seed list up to date because the internet vanishes very quickly.
Thank you.